Okay, let's dig in to chapter 4 and look at the PowerPoint here, and we'll play from the start. Okay, so chapter 4 is socialization, interaction, and the self. So, man, this is a pretty cool chapter. A lot of more, as you've seen, reading the book and looking at Crash Course Sociology and some of the highlights from the PowerPoints. Wow, sociology is filled with lots of verbiage, lots of concepts and theories, and this chapter is no different. And the influence of socialization on us and what we call agents of socialization and through interaction and that influence on the self, right? I just even look at this picture and I go, wow, this is socialization. I would love to be, this is socialization happening right in front of our eyes. I wish I could be in that room, right? And listen to, the laughter, the emotions, right, that are all socialized, right, that are considered social norms within a group. And if I want to fit into the group, then to some degree, right, I have to what? I accept and play out and express myself through that group's social norms, right? And it's a beauty culture, right? Different groups, age groups, religious groups, cultural groups, racial groups, socioeconomic groups have different beauty standards, clothing standards, expressions, the way they walk and talk. And it's just fascinating to me, which is all part of culture, right? But remember, when we looked at culture, that culture is transmitted through what? Interaction, through generations, right? And typically we belong to groups, and you typically meet your partner, right, in groups, because usually you partner up with someone who shares, typically, not always, right? There's always exceptions to the rule, right? But generally speaking, the pattern, right, that sociologists have observed, and that you probably observe too, is there's a pattern where like people connect with like people. If I have certain values and beliefs, I connect. Boy, there's nothing that's challenged, right? Our relational, the time that we spend with each other on social media or face to face or connecting with people, than people that hold similar values and beliefs. And nothing has challenged that like our current times with COVID, masking, vaccinations, ideas or thoughts, political ideas or thoughts, right, that have brought people together and also polarized people, right? Oh my goodness, it's been a fascinating couple of years through a sociological perspective. I mean, it's just everywhere. Anyway, so I would love to be in that room and just look at and observe and experience the culture and the socialization processes going on in their conversations and their expressions and their behaviors, right? And even minor slights of sanctioning between each other as they rib each other or call each other out. I don't know. Anyway, it would be fascinating. So let's dig into the material. So definition of socialization is the process, right? It's a process that lasts from birth. Some people would even say before birth, right? In utero, but we'll just say from birth to what? Through life, all the way through its stages to death, right? And it's a process of learning and internalizing, right? It's a transmission of culture, right? Which include the values and the beliefs and the social norms, right? Of a social group, not only a society, but the social group you belong to. And that social group is any two or more people. It could be your family of origin. It could be your family, it could be your school group, right? If you remember back in high school, or maybe some of the students in this class are still in high school. It's interesting to talk to high school teachers about the different culture that each class has, right? So say you're a senior in high school, or you think back to your senior year, right? Or you think back maybe to your junior year. Did the senior class, the class ahead of you, have a different vibe, a different kind of feel? Yeah, it was a different culture, right? Because it was made up of the people in that group and different people that had power to influence the culture and that group's culture, right? But certainly regional norms. And so that social group, right, could be rural, urban, could be racial groups, could be lots of different political groups, religious groups, and then by which we become functioning members of society, right? So that's on a larger, it's on a larger scale, right? And if you remember back to chapter 1, functionalism, right? The function of education is to what? Socialize, right? So for the purpose of what? For the purpose of what? Social stability and solidarity, functioning, right, as a society, right? Learning how to shake hands, learning how to raise your hand, learning how to drive on the right-hand side of the road, how to stop on red, go on green, and go faster on yellow or orange or whatever. Anyway, so socialization, right? And that's where that transmission of culture happens, right? Now, we're going to talk a little bit about nature and nurture, right? So nature is your genetics, your physical appearance, and your biological influences. And sometimes we can misinterpret nurture or the socialization for nature, right? A lot of times people think, oh, women have a different biology and therefore everything women do that are different than men is biological based, right? And of course, on the other end of that spectrum, right, there's the blank slate theory that say, no, men and women, there is no difference, right, other than some minor biological, and that what all gender differences are socialized. Those would be the extremes, right? In the middle is probably somewhere in between is probably reality. So nurture, that's the environment, the socialization, the social influences, the upbringing, right? So even if we go back to our hairy armpit, right? Nature versus nurture and the sociological perspective of armpit hair, right? So what's the biology? What's the nature? Would be what? Armpit hair. But the influence of nurture in the socialization process is pretty powerful. And we probably, until this class, right? Maybe you're getting tired of this picture, but until this class, you probably didn't give much thought of it, or very much thought of it. That's certainly not from a typically from a sociological lens or perspective, right? And so that's socialized behavior, and that's passed down within a group, right? And maybe you could even say, even though it is natural for women to have armpit hair, right? The acceptance of that, right, would then be a push against a social construction, which is a new social construction of acceptance of nature or biology in this case, right? So kind of interesting, nature versus nurture. Okay, let's talk about sociology and the self, okay? There is the self, right? And the self concept. I'll get back to that in a little bit, but certainly we have the looking glass self, right? Which the book talks about, and the concept of self. Where do we get our concept of self? I'll come back to that in a second. And then dramaturgy, right? And that's Goffman talking about dramaturgy, the backstage self and the front stage self, right? Backstage, who you are in preparation for your front stage self. And that might be when you get up and get ready to go to school, when you went to, say, high school, right? You got up in the morning, you decided, am I going to take a shower? Am I not? What am I going to wear? And, is that influenced? And then you get to school, and we'll talk a little bit more about dramaturgy in the next slide. But impression management, yes, impression management. How do we manage the impression we give outwardly to others, the way we laugh, the way we dress, the way we walk, the way we relate, right? Impression management. Boy, we spend a lot of time on impression management. What happens if you're in a group and you violate the social norms? Sometimes in some groups, if you want to be part of some group that you typically are not socialized into from an early age, it can be take a lot of energy and impression management, right, to fit in. So kind of interesting, right? What are we willing to do to gain social capital, to gain social class and status, to gain power, right? And in some cases, wealth. Okay, social construction, right? And we've talked about this before. So the social construction is what is the meaning we give something, and the social construction of self. We'll talk about that in a second. but here, look, the looking glass self, right? And other people, right, act as mirrors. Like this is like a hall of mirrors kind of image. We see ourselves through other people's lenses, right? Or they reflect back in us, right? So the definition, okay, stop reading for just a second. The definition of self-concept is how we perceive others perceive us. So now let's go back to the reading, right? So how my mom and dad see me, like a saint, an angel, how my girlfriend sees me, or at least how I perceive my girlfriend sees me, right? I'm tough, right? How my older brother sees me, I'm a wimp. See the muscles on the two middle ones, the drooping on the, how my older brothers, how my ex-girlfriend sees me, I'm evil, I'm the devil incarnate. Okay. So what would you say has the greatest influence in how you see yourself, right? Which mirror or image reflected back at you gives you the greatest indication of who you are as you perceive yourself through the eyes or in the reflection of others? Wow, how powerful is that? How powerful are other people? How powerful is the socialization process, right? That when we get a negative reaction back, how powerful is that, especially those that we care about? How powerful are those people's action or reactions to us, how we perceive that, to changing, influencing our behavior, how we laugh, how we interact, right? What we do for a job, where we say we're going to college. Oh my gosh, right? How we present ourselves on social media or Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, right? Pretty crazy. Man, a lot of sociology. It's pretty powerful stuff, isn't it? Okay, dramaturgy. So this is an approach pioneered by Irving Goffman, I said that a little earlier, in which social life is analyzed. So we observe social life, right, in terms of its similarities to a theatrical performance. So William Shakespeare said, the world is a stage, right? The world is a stage. And he says we're always acting, right? And we're acting to fit into the social norms to some degree, or if we're countercultural, right, to violate those social norms, but typically, right? And dramaturgy encompasses more than just the stage and our own personal actions, right? It encompasses the whole stage and even the theater, right? Think of graduation and the theatrical experience of, walking down the aisle and hearing the song, the typical graduation mark, dun, 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 right? Okay, so, and then the caps and the gowns and even the degrees. And at COCC, we give out roses and somebody gives up and gives a keynote speech and there's a valedictorian and then you do move the tassel to the other side and you throw your cap up and even the things that are, painted on the top of the caps. And wow, that's all dramaturgy. Maybe even like the American Pledge of Allegiance or the national anthem, whatever is done at, wow, all of that is and all those kind of fit within certain norms as well as what we expect to see at a graduation, right? And then we adhere to the social norms, because if you don't, then you get sanctioned, like, well, you're not going to graduate if you don't, behave yourself. Anyway, so dramaturgy, right? And we see it in rock concerts or music folk festivals. We see dramaturgy happening in, brew pubs, right? Certain behaviors, certain new, the environment, and how it's in the music that's playing and the outdoor spaces, how waiters and waitresses, servers interact with you. That's all part of the stage, right? It's all part of the stage. Even the people in the audience, right? It's all part of the theater, right? It's all part of the theater of dramaturgy. Wow. I mean, you could spend a couple of days kind of checking this out, right? One of the places I love thinking about, when I think about sociology, is country clubs. Oh, right? Because it's upper class, it's pretty elite, and there's a lot of bourgeois tradition, And man, there's a lot of dramaturgy in how people act, how they react, the structures of the buildings, of different rooms, and yeah, it's pretty crazy. So I'm sure you could think of even your own graduation from high school or work. The workplace has a dramaturgy, right? COCC has a dramaturgy about it, right? Certainly graduation does. And then agents of socialization, right? So remember, we are not isolated. We're not islands. We are in large part products of what the influences of what? Of other people, right? Of other people. Well, who are those agents? Who are those influencers of who we are through the socialization process? Family, right? Your family of origin, right, has a huge influence on your behaviors, what your social norms are, what are your family values and your family of origin beliefs and behaviors. And gosh, if you even think about like when you start dating someone, right, your partner comes from a different family culture, a different socialized set of values and norms, and boy, and you try to get along with usually they're pretty similar, you're not going to get along very long, but even the nuances, right, between the two different family values, beliefs, behaviors, social norms, right, agents of social, our parents, right, our family structure, our parents are very influential in our socialization. Schools, right? It's really the hidden curriculum, right, of socialization through what, K through 12, and now even into college, right? These values and these beliefs of our culture, right? Of the dominant culture coming in through the schools, right? And socializing us to be good, at least from a functionalist perspective, good citizens, right? That get along for the stability and solidarity of society, right? And then peers, right? Your friends, right? Talk about, peer pressure, conforming, right? Group conforming, right? That's part of the socialization process. The media, oh my goodness, talk about power, right? Movies, TV, social media, music, books. Man, yeah, a lot of probably one of the, yeah, pretty darn powerful, right, as an agent of socialization or an influence through the socialization process. Religion and other social institutions, right? So your workplace is a social institution, right? Religion is a social institution. Yeah, I mean, just even work, like punching in and punching out. And boy, if you've worked a couple different jobs, you know that even each company has its own what we call corporate culture, right? And that's socialized. When you better get socialized and on board, or you're going to get written up, right? If you deviate too much from the social norms of that workplace. Okay. Total institutions and resocialization. So a total institution would be prison, would also be like a mental institution, right? The closest, it's where all of your for the most part, your whole life is what? Controlled, right? Military, pretty close to that, right? Especially in boot camp, right? Total institution. Not quite total in the military, but it's probably the closest thing outside of prison and mental institutions. But the whole point of even boot camp, right, is to re-socialize you, right? Is to change your values and behaviors and beliefs for a functioning purpose. In prison is to what? Rehabilitate you, right? So when you come back into society, you're a good citizen again. Mental institute maybe is to become a functioning member of society without hurting yourself or others. And the military, right, is to get on board to accomplish the mission of the military, right? You have to be a efficient, functioning military. Everybody has to be on the same page, and that takes a socialization process. Okay, so here's a visual of agents of socialization as an example, right? Family, peers, school, mass media, work, religion, right? Those are examples of agents of socialization in a visual. Okay, status and roles, right? This is pretty cool, really, right? So status, right, is and we hold many statuses, right? But a status is your place in society. Usually we think of it like your master status. I mean, we have multiple statuses. Usually my master, for me, my master status is probably college professor, right? But my status is also male, white, middle class or upper class. My religion, maybe, if I'm religious, where I live in the country, where I live, do I live urban, suburban, status? What else? I'm also a father, a husband, a son, a brother, a grandfather. So I have lots of statuses, right? I'm a football coach. Yeah, so lots of statuses, but all those statuses that I put together that I mentioned, that's called our status set. That's a status set. Now, my ascribed status is typically something I can't control. So it's usually given at birth, right? So at birth, I was born into a certain social class. At birth, I was born at least, recognized as a white male. At 16, I became eligible for a driver's license. Earning the driver's license was achieved status, but becoming of age, right? Let's see. When my dad got remarried I was 10. No, let's see, I was 9. Right, I became a stepson, right? That was an ascribed status that I had been ascribed later in life, right? So there are ascribed statuses. So achieved statuses are things that you have control over, that you achieve or that you agree to or that you make happen, right? Getting your college degree is an achieved status, right? So that'd be an example of achieved status. Embodied status is, how I present myself, right? And how others perceive me as presenting myself. Sometimes we spend a lot of time on our embodied status, right? It's very important in our culture. And then our master status, I already told you about that, master status. Now, stereotyping, right? You guys kind of know what that is. So we stereotype different statuses. So we have expectations, right? We kind of, if you say, hey, my master status is I'm a college professor at COCC, that comes with a host of generalizations that we call stereotyping, right? I guess generalization would be, I prefer the word generalization because generalization can be supported with data. Stereotyping it could be wrong, it can be outliers that have been labeled as the dominant, but anyway, you get what I mean, stereotyping. And then your role. So what is a role? So with every status, right, society has socially constructed certain expectations of roles that you will fulfill within that status. So as a dad, right, in my generation, right, a father and husband, right, that's my status, right? There were roles that you would be the bread earner, that you'd be the primary earner, that you would, change the tire when the car got flat, that you would, there's certain gender roles, right? Same with being a mother or a wife, right? There's certain expectations that our society is socially constructed that go with that role. Same with being your professor, right? There are certain roles that you expect, right? In general, as a class, right? But as a member of a group, your group of students, you have certain expectations of me as a professor. Where does that come from? It comes from what? The social construction. Where do you get that? Through what? Interaction. Okay, good. And then you can pause this if you want to really look at this, and it really kind of breaks down status set and role set, right? Status, role, status set, role set. Take a look at that, get a good visual for that. Okay, you can pause it if you want to look at that. I'm going to move on. Emotions and personality, right? Emotions are socialized, right? And they are social constructions to some degree. Some are not. It's really interesting. There's been a lot of studies on that in the last few decades. So I'll let you read about that more in your book if you want. But personality, right? We to some degree, right, have personality. Some of those are encouraged, it's interesting. There's like birth order has a lot of influence on personality to some degree, or at least on some parts of temperament or personality. And then agency, how much freedom do you have? How much agency do you have to be your own person, right? How much influence is part of that agency? It's interesting. Okay, so that was a quick chapter. Didn't want to spend too much time. Very interesting stuff. But more in the book if you want to expand your knowledge, you want to go deeper, you want to go wider. Crash Course Sociology. There's lots of research out there at the library. I encourage you to do that, to take this time in your life to go look at that material. So hope you've enjoyed this lecture, and we will see you for the next